In the vast blue skies over Europe during World War II, a group of young black pilots flew with a purpose far greater than orders or medals. They were the Tuskegee Airmen, America's first all-African American fighter squadron. And they were determined to prove their worth in a world that doubted them at every turn. When they first arrived in Europe, they were met with skepticism. White bomber crews whispered that they didn't want colored escorts. Many believed these men couldn't handle the stress of air combat or the complexity of modern aircraft. But the Tuskegee Airmen, trained in Alabama under scorching heat and constant prejudice, had learned one thing above all: excellence was their only weapon against racism. Their mission was to escort American bombers deep into enemy territory. The job was simple on paper but brutal in practice: keep the bombers safe from German fighters that tore through the skies with deadly precision. The U.S. Air Force had strict regulations on escort distances. Fighters were to fly a few miles away, maintaining flexible coverage while conserving fuel. Most pilots followed those rules. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't. Led by Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., a calm and disciplined man who had endured silence and isolation at West Point because of his race, the Red Tails, named for the crimson paint on their planes, adopted a new tactic. They called it closer than regulations. Instead of flying miles ahead or circling from afar, they stayed close, sometimes within a few hundred yards of the bombers they protected. German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs would dive in, expecting to catch the bombers unguarded. But instead, they'd find the Red Tails waiting, wings flashing red in the sunlight, guns ready. The Tuskegee pilots didn't chase glory or go off hunting for kills like many other fighter units. Their job was protection, not personal records. And they took that job personally. One mission after another, they escorted bombers across enemy lines: Berlin, Munich, the Ploiești oil fields. The skies thundered with explosions and tracer fire. Bombers were often torn apart midair. But when the Red Tails flew beside them, the odds changed. Crews began to notice something extraordinary. When the Red Tails were on duty, they came home alive. Word spread across the Allied airfields. Bomber crews started asking for them by name. Give us the Red Tails. For pilots who once didn't want to fly with black men, that was a quiet revolution. The Germans learned to recognize them too. The sight of red-painted tails became a warning: trouble was coming. One Luftwaffe pilot later described the Red Tails as devils who never left the bombers alone. When they returned to base, their victories weren't celebrated like others. There were no parades, no front-page headlines. In many American towns, they were still denied entry into restaurants and restrooms. But among bomber crews, the men whose lives they'd saved, they were heroes. One pilot, years later, recalled looking out his bomber window over the Alps and seeing a red-tail fighter right beside him. He just looked over and gave me a thumbs up, he said. I knew we were going to make it home that day. After the war, their success could no longer be ignored. The Tuskegee Airmen shattered one of the military's biggest lies, that courage and skill depended on color. Their performance became one of the key arguments for President Truman's decision to desegregate the U.S. Armed Forces in 1948. Most of them returned home quietly, to a country that had changed too little. Some became commercial pilots, others engineers, teachers, and community leaders. Many never spoke much about what they did in those skies. But their legacy took root in every pilot who followed. Today, the Red Tails are remembered not just as warriors, but as symbols of dignity and resilience. Their story is not one of revenge or anger, but of discipline, brotherhood, and purpose. They flew closer than regulations because they had something to prove. Not to the enemy, but to their own country. They proved that excellence breaks barriers, that courage needs no color, and that when you fly with conviction, side by side, closer than anyone expects, you can change history without losing a single soul. There were missions where the airmen flew through storms of anti-aircraft fire, their cockpits rattling, engines screaming. Some never made it back. Yet even through loss and exhaustion, their discipline never broke. They stayed, closer than regulations, protecting their bombers. Through nearly 200 missions without losing a single one to enemy fighters. A record unmatched in the entire war.